Welcome back, everyone. I've got some new tools that I want to try out for my streaming setup. So I hope you'll bear with me as I try this out for the first time. There may be a couple foibles here and there, but we're going to try this out and do some screen sharing. So we're going to go over the people's hotspot today. That is Puny Pecan Eel. They've been doing some different things with their antenna, and so and asking me questions. So I figured, why not take a look at these results and see what they're doing all together so that we can analyze this and learn from it as well. I don't even know all of what's coming up in this, so I may say some things that are wrong, or I may have to think it through as what I'm seeing. You may see this as well and notice things right away or get it wrong with me. So we're just going to do this together and learn together. So here we go. What? We're seeing the screen now. So all right, here we have Puny Pecan Eel, the first people's hotspot. There are more manufacturers coming online, but this is the Rack Miner V1 that lined up, and we're going to take a look at the witnesses. Now you can see that there is a host of witnesses, very near and far, primarily to the north of this hotspot. Now, if you remember from the pictures, if you've seen them, and I did not prep those to be seen, so I apologize for that, but I will maybe get them in a later video. Anyways, let's take a look at this. Now there are 28 witnesses online, so that is quite a few. Now you don't need 28 witnesses. It doesn't mean that you're going to be making hundreds of HNT or anything like that just because you have a lot of witnesses. Anything in that 3 to 5 zone, and then your return on investment from those earnings are going to be not as much. So you want at least 3 to 5 witnesses. That would be awesome. Of course, it's fine to have more too. And I think that the one thing that I've seen from here is having witnesses that are closer and farther away are great as well for earnings. Then you're ensuring that you have coverage. So let's take a look at this. Now, the predominant ones are of course very far away, and there's only a few that are really close. Now we could pull this up in Explorer and start measuring distances, but we can also see here how things are affected. Um, we know that these are the witnesses and these are the RSSI values. Now we'll get into that in a little bit, and I've actually got a chart here. Find it there. So this is how we read those values. So this is basically how we see RSSI on here and SNR. And Pickle, thank you for participating so much in the comments. I'm seeing just conversations happening back and forth on the channel. Totally appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being involved in this channel and participating. Hopefully, can send people back your way on the more technical details. So if you didn't know, Pickle has a lot of radio frequency background, teacher, and all that kind of stuff. So you can get some really technical stuff. But I want to at least point this out is that when you're looking up witness data, you want to look at and see how close to this line you're running. And if you're getting an invalid witness, then that means that there's something to be improved, or maybe you can't improve it. It's just to be wary of where your signal is falling. Of course, if it's in this green area up here, it is valid, and that's a good thing. So let's get back to the witnesses here. So again, there's predominant to the north, and then all around east and west. Now, I did talk about this in an earlier video about antennas, but it's interesting because the building is on a third floor on a balcony, and and then the balcony is facing this way. And for some reason, that signal is bouncing off potentially something over here, maybe even close, but then coming back this way over here all the way to Shakopee. It's just really interesting that somehow it could be getting signal all the way to the west when there's a building in the way in the line of sight. So this is another thing about radio frequencies and placement that keep experimenting. You might, and I didn't think there would be any witnesses to the west at all. And lo and behold, there is. Now, there is a hill that kind of comes down from, like this elevation is higher. So there's going to be line of sight problems in getting to communicate to hotspots south of the people's hotspot, Puny Pecan Eel. So interesting nonetheless. And let's think about when we're changing antennas. So the Puny Pecan Eel has been, the host for it has been experimenting with different antennas. So originally there was a rack 8 dBi and then a 10 dBi antenna, which we'll see in a minute of how that happened to affect it. So I'm going to go to Sitebot. Sitebot is another useful site for analyzing earnings day to day and also month to month, and just getting some interesting information here. So you can sign up with Sitebot and you can get one site monitored for free. So if you only have one hotspot, I totally recommend signing up here. You can get alerts on it. I actually have a tip that I'll share at the end of the video that talks about a reason why you'd want to do that. So keep watching. So here we see that originally this was with the rack 8 dBi antenna, and you can see that there's some variation here, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. Some days are better than others. There's weather and other things that can affect radio frequency transmissions, so your earnings may vary. So this is not meaning that on this day they weren't doing anything right, or maybe they were trying to reconfigure their setup, or just tighten things up a little bit more, or maybe the hotspot was down for a little bit. They had to rework some wiring or something like that. So it doesn't mean that necessarily it's a bad thing. It's just natural variation. So keep in mind your earnings can fluctuate. Now, of course, going from 7 tokens in one day down to 2 very quickly, and then back up to 7, that means that there was something situational, and I would maybe think like a high wind day or something like that. So watch your earnings, but don't try and mess with your setup right away. Give it some time, pay attention to what's happening, not just with your setup, and that will help. Up and down, up and down. You can see that, okay, so it's pretty consistent in this range. So about 6 HNT per day-ish. We could probably calculate the exact average, but then right when it got here, interesting. So this might have been, a roller coaster down of bad weather or something like that, and like, oh, I got to get a new antenna, and as you see this again, you're like, okay, I'm ordering from Amazon. I'm gonna get the new antenna, and I want to get my earnings back up. You wait, just see what happens. So they put on and I'm guessing that somewhere around this day there was the new antenna was installed. And so maybe a little bit of downtime while the antenna was changed, and then put in, and then experimented with, and then of course the witnesses have to kind of reset, and you'll see things go up and down, and you'll lose witnesses. One thing I really recommend is before you change your antenna, go back to this and take a screenshot. This will help you understand what witnesses you're losing and which ones you're gaining. So if you're going to change the dBi on your antenna, it's good to know this before and after you make your change. Now, the recommendation that I keep saying is anywhere from a week to 2 weeks before you change your setup again. And it could be even longer. I think I've waited, at least when I was initially setting up my own personal hotspot, I was waiting at least 2 weeks by making changes. And I think you can go a little bit quicker than that, especially, but then if you're going outside with your antenna, like you can, do that a little bit quicker pace. If you're changing your antenna, you might want to give it some time because there's natural fluctuations. You don't want to pull the trigger too early on, pulling out that or swapping out your antenna. So take your screenshot before, then put on the new antenna, and then watch for a while and take another screenshot. Pay attention to which witnesses you're losing and which ones you're gaining. And that way you can compare your totals. Make sure when you do your screenshot that you get your recent witness count here too. That would be very helpful. And if you want, you can even go down and get some screenshots of these witnesses if you have few. But with 28, that's going to be hard to keep track of. So just something to be aware of as you're doing this. So this is Sitebot. I'm guessing that the new antenna was along here. This is an interesting one. Something happened on this day where there was 0 earnings. Not sure what. This could have been a bad weather day. This could have been you know what, they lost power or something like that for, you know, a day, or the router problems, or like me, I ordered, I had to get an adapter for my cable, and I had removed my hotspot, so I wasn't going to take it down. So I was just down, purely down for a day. So there's situational data here that probably is helpful. And then you can see, oh, well, went up to back to 12 tokens a day. So this is sciencing that setup and figuring out what works best for you. And again, back down to 2. So something's going on here. You know, you might have thought, oh, more dBi is better. Maybe not necessarily. If you're getting this high fluctuation from 9 to 0 to 12, that might be so situational, it's not worth it over the long term. You got to see how it behaves as the hotspot figures out what it is. And we'll see some other things that are interesting here in a little bit. So this is Sitebot. Again, I recommend you checking it out. You can even look at those totals day to day by clicking on this link here and then seeing how those totals are. And you can copy and paste it out of here as well. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so now I'm going to go to another one, and I can put a link to this in the description as well. I definitely don't recommend putting this many days on. I just wanted to show at maximum. I would start with something like, you know, 3 or 5 or something like that. It just crunches through the numbers a lot faster when it's pulling this data. So what this is an analysis of all the challenges, all the beacons, and I do want to give Wishflower a shout out here. So thank you for doing that, putting this together. This is an excellent dashboard to really science in on your setup and how you're doing. So we'll talk through a couple of these visuals and see what they mean. Cool. So we have Puny Pecan Eel in here, and we're going to look at beacons. Now remember, beacon is one hotspot emitting a signal, and there's variations of how it does the beaconing and who can pick it up. And so you'll see that, oh, at the beginning, nothing was failing. And then all of a sudden, oh, we get some failures. Now, is this a bad thing? No, it just means that there were communications that the network was trying to tell Puny Pecan Eel, hey, beacon, and it failed to transmit. So this is interesting data. You know, we saw there was the relayed flag out. This may have been where it just didn't get through the network fast enough to pick up the beacon, the command to beacon or something like that. So, and it was 3 days in a row, but then all of a sudden got better for a while and then came back. So this is kind of a fluctuating one. And you know, okay, the last couple days have been fairly consistent. So maybe we got that out. So we would see that, okay, well, maybe it's cyclical. You know, there's 5 days here that's really good, and then a couple days that are not so great, and then a couple days great, and then again. So the algorithm is doing something to figure out what is going on with this setup. And of course, when we change the antenna, the things have to fine tune themselves again. I don't know all the background of how the hotspot actually works. It'd be great to get on a podcast, you know, and dive into this data a little bit more, but and hear from the people at Helium how to read this even better. So Wishflower, if you're out there and you understand this more, or somebody at Helium, please let's hear about this. This is interesting stuff. All right, so then the witness validity. So that means when the beacon goes, another hotspot hears you and witnesses you. We get this question a lot, is what is a witness? So that's what it is. It's another hotspot receives the signal that's transmitted from your hotspot. So also when you witness, that's the better one. That means that you receive data. So the most maximum rewards aren't on your ability to transmit, it's on your ability to receive signal. Getting to the end game of this is IoT devices that are sending the signals back to the hotspot. So that's the one that we want rewarded. So we see a couple of times where there's no witness. So the beacon went out and there was no witness. So this is interesting, and you might want to be a little concerned when there was a lot of no witnesses, or later on in this there's invalid witness. So they heard you, but it was just too strong. It wasn't within the boundaries that the Helium network recommends. So keep watch for that. So now we see Well, we know that from this Sitebot data, looked like something around here changed. Something in this time period changed because then all of a sudden the earnings changed. They're pretty consistent, but now they changed. So I'm going to pair that up with this data and see, oh, we actually lost witnesses. So this actually, if the story, and as I understand it, the 8 dBi was in place until around maybe the 11th. And I don't have the exact date offhand, but judging from this, we can see that the 8 dBi is actually probably a better choice than the 10 dBi at this point. And so I actually talked with the host and they said that they did have an 8 dBi on order and we're going to install it. So we actually might see the earnings improve again here coming up. And we see the 5 here. So we know that, okay, there was 5 over here, but only 3 were valid. So maybe they did get it installed, recently. And so now that it's coming back, so we might see this again and earnings improve. So this is how you can science up your setup and figure out what is the best antenna for you. Again, this is more stuff on your beacons, how many you did, how many witnesses you had. One thing to really pay attention to is this is invalid witnessing. So if you've got invalid witnesses, then you really want to pay attention to that, what you're doing, or if they're near or far, and what the data is doing. And there's just a lot of data to just get in here and figure out what's interesting and what's not. But this is a good website. I just like these bar charts just to figure out what's happening. So, all right, so a couple other screenshots that I know that there's been requests to get these. I went over these in the live stream and they wanted a shortened version of it. So I just want to talk through, these antennas at the higher dBi you go, you might get a longer signal, a farther distance signal, but you will get less range from that. So sorry, not distance, but it's more so vertical. So you might have to go out farther. So this, a hotspot at 7 dBi, if it's closer, you might actually get picked up if it's here. But even if the hotspot is here, it will overshoot it. And with the 9 dBi, it's even farther. The closest hotspots may be too far, and that's what I've seen in my own case. When I have hotspots that are too close to me, I can overshoot them with these high dBi antennas. So I have a 5.8 dBi antenna along the way that I'm going to try out. And what I've heard is that they're still getting 20-kilometer witnesses or 20-kilometer plus witnesses on the 5.8 dBi. So I'm going to keep sciencing this up and sharing the data. Obviously, I love when it's on the people's hotspot because that's the one that I would prefer to talk about than my own. So next one, we talked about this, valid, invalid witnesses. And you can find that on the activity. Now, I might have to click on this and let it load. They've been working on the activity portion. Apparently, this is generating too much traffic and it's taking down performance. So that was actually really quick while I'm talking. So you can come in here, and when there is a witness, you can get the information from here. And try to, find the information. This is one of those foibles that I probably should have talked through or loaded up first. Click to view beacon details. Let's try that. They've changed this a lot, so this is me trying to figure out how to get the data on those witnesses. It just says valid right now. Well, I'm sorry, I'll try and find that later. But anyways, you can, there are the values and they have been in there somewhere. I think I saw some of the data on actually this one. Finding it here. Yeah, so this is the challenge receipt details. So that's what we're looking for. So in here, there's the witness RSSI and the witness SNR. So if we take that -112 and -8, -112 and -8. So that's actually right in here. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So if you're trying to triangulate, like, oh, I keep missing a witness, or sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. Well, it might be on this edge. And so that just helps you understand a little bit more about your setup. Another thing to understand about antennas, of course, I keep getting messages on it and I keep having to repeat, it doesn't matter what, um, well, sorry, it does matter what antenna you use, but people think that the higher the dBi, the better. And that's just not the case. It's highly situational. So here I like this graphic because, and let me see if I can zoom into this. Yeah. So um, 9 dBi goes very far, but if you're on the side of the mountain, it doesn't matter. You're not receiving data from the inside of the mountain. So it's situational. So the 3 dBi, so this one could get, if the antenna is on top of this car here, which of course we're on houses or whatever, so that would get signal from up here and receive signal, whereas the 9 dBi wouldn't get any signals from up here. So you really got to think about which way, or where you're at on the hillside or in the line of sight, because this can really change which antenna you use. Now on a flat signal, of course, if it's flat surface, well then you're gonna be able to transmit farther. But then see here on this 9 dBi, if something is in here, it's not receiving. It's not going to be able to receive the data. If this is your antenna, you're not going to be able to receive that information. So for this case, the 6 dBi might be a good case to have data up here. But if it's a tall high-rise and you're trying to get data from the tall high-rise and you can't get your hotspot up here, well, then maybe it actually is better that you have the 3 dBi so you can get the data down to here. So it's just something to keep in mind that this is situational. Higher dBi is not always the answer for your application. One more thing to talk through, and I will zoom back out here. Now this is optional. I don't have this on any of my hotspots, so don't worry about this at all. But this is the typical setup. This is a kind of like a rack antenna with the N-type male connector here, and then to an N-type female connector. This is the LMR 400 cable right here, and then the RP SMA male connector right there. And then this end would come and connect to the back of the miner. And of course, this is the helium hotspot. This hotspot and the rack miner both have the RPSMA female. There are some hotspots that I have not gotten my hands on yet. And of course, as I get the information on those connectors, I will definitely share with you that information. So that is our video and me trying out my screen sharing abilities. I hope that this has been helpful in talking through the people's hotspot and what it's been up to. Again, we're going to keep paying this forward, or HNTing this forward through the chain as the supply chain issues hopefully clear up soon. It's exciting to hear more and more hotspots coming online. I also promised you a little bit of a tip. So this weekend I happened to experience a power failure, and it was due to me not understanding or not knowing about the internal workings of my own house. It is a new house, and there was a GFI outlet that got tripped without my knowledge, and it actually linked up to one of my network switches, and that was connected to my miner. So my miner went down. So the power was on, but the Ethernet cable was not getting signal. So it is very important to think about how your electricity is supplying your miner. So what I did this weekend is I figured out and got a PoE injector, power over Ethernet injector, to also add to it. So now I have a couple options for redundant power. So I could pull either one of I couldn't pull the power over Ethernet, but I could pull the power plug off that GFI, and the switch still stayed up because it can take, it's an awesome switch, so it takes power over Ethernet. So I was able to keep up mining even though I technically lost power. Of course, you definitely want to consider a UPS in there as well for all of your equipment. If you're really trying to keep running 24/7, there's also stuff out there that can alert you when it's down. So just another tip for you to keep mining and keep up all the time. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any comments or questions, absolutely throw them in the comments below. Also, as usual, like and subscribe. Appreciate you watching today, and peace.